One Piece is an extremely popular series. It's known for its over-the-top action and a world that constantly pushes the limits of imagination. The series is filled with unstoppable hex abilities and incredible feats of strength and speed. So, with all that in mind, why is One Piece power scaling so bad on the internet? And no, I am not talking about agenda, I am talking about power scaling. In this video, I want to go over some of my biggest issues with how people scale One Piece and try to clarify a few things. My first issue: read the series. One Piece is soon to be the best-selling comic series of all time, so you'd think that the bare minimum requirement for scaling it, well, would be to actually read it. But somehow that's not the case. I'll regularly open a well-made, popular, well-received video about One Piece power scaling, and there's like a 50% chance the person is scaling secondhand. It's always some guy going, people scale this character to this level, or they say this is the meta for One Piece, and their entire argument is just screenshots from Versus Battle Wiki. At this point, you're not scaling One Piece. You're scaling other people's opinions about One Piece. I can't be the only one who thinks that reading the most popular comic of the modern era should be a requirement for scaling it. My second issue is about the difference between destructive scale of attacks and their potency. Unlike in series with more straightforward power scaling, like Naruto or Dragon Ball before the Buu Saga, where destructive scale directly scales to the power of every individual attack, and is the primary way of showing the growing strength of the verse as it continues. One Piece takes a less obvious approach. Just like many other high-level fictional series, One Piece decides to limit the destructive scale of attacks, with One Piece being one of the best examples of this phenomenon. In the story, there are multiple explicit ways that One Piece tells us that the strength of an attack doesn't directly correlate with the destruction it creates. This fact is so well ingrained in the writing of One Piece that it is used as a plot point in multiple main story arcs. This fact makes One Piece power scaling quite esoteric, resulting in much confusion on the internet. So I'll try to clear it up a bit. From Alabasta onwards, all relative fighters should be limiting the DC of their attacks, because on Alabasta we find out that powerful fighters limit the area that is destroyed by their attacks to concentrate more power into every individual attack. We also find out that swordsmen specifically decide what to cut and what not to cut to increase their strength. This is relevant because later we find out that swordsmanship and armorman haki are the same thing. So, just like with swordsmanship, every haki user also limits the area that is destroyed by an attack. This is further compounded by the later introduction of advanced armament haki. To achieve the advanced application of armament haki, you must further limit the area that gets affected by your attack to only include the internals of the target. Limitations of destructive scale also play a key part in the story of several arcs. For example, Enel's strongest attacks only have a radius of at most 50 meters, but his goal is to destroy the entirety of Skypiea, with the exception of the Golden Bell. So, he used the Arc Maxim to spread out his maximum attack into thunderclouds, which he later planned to use to destroy all of Skypiea minus the Golden Bell. So, when a character in One Piece destroys an area with an attack, their attack potency is limited by the size of the area that was destroyed. So, when someone scales a One Piece attack based only on how much area is destroyed, they're lowballing. My third issue is the inability of people to settle on a multiplier for Luffy's transformations. Have you ever heard somebody say something like this? Base Luffy on Enel's lobby was equal to Bluno, and Gear 2nd Luffy was equal to Lucci, who is 5 times stronger than Bluno, so Gear 2nd is a 5 times amp. I hear this said often, most of the time, in a very matter-of-fact way, which is weird to me, since it's blatantly not true. Base Luffy was just stronger and faster than not just Bluno, but Bluno while using the Rokushiki. Bluno literally couldn't dodge or tank Luffy's attacks without significant damage, and he couldn't hit him. Bluno had to resort to a sneak attack with his Devil Fruit, and he still couldn't hurt Luffy. Now yes, the stat difference wasn't so large that Luffy could just load with him. He even says that to keep moving forward, he can't beat him just in base, and opts to take him out quickly with Gear 2nd. So the first part of this common claim is just wrong, and believe it or not, the second part is also wrong. Base Luffy, while tired, fights Lucci with the Rokushiki to a standstill, with Luffy being slightly on the back foot, until Lucci and Luffy both transform and we see Luffy get the upper hand. Lucci only evens the fight after using the Rokushiki to their extreme and further transforming to his fighting form. So, it's more accurate to say that Base Luffy is slightly below Base Lucci with the Rokushiki, and Gear 2nd Luffy is even with hybrid fighting form Lucci. So the idea that Gear 2nd is just a neat 5 times multiplier doesn't hold up. There is no confirmed multiplier. The only one with any actual backing is 10 times. Because Luffy confirms that when he uses Gear Second, his movements are Soro, which is a movement technique in which the user performs their normal movements 10 or more times at the same time. There's also an official release of Databook Yellow in French that says that Gear Second increases power and speed by tenfold. Is it perfect evidence? No, but it's still better than the evidence for every other multiplier, which is nothing. Another thing people somehow miss about Luffy's transformation is that Luffy can stack his gears. He does it often. For example, on Frillbark, he uses Gear Second with Gear Third, and on Dressrosa, Gear Fourth with Gear Third. This matters a lot, because Gear Fourth is stated to be several times beyond his previous limits, which would be Gear Second with Gear Third, and not just Gear Third as many people like to say. We know that Gear Third is noticeably stronger than Gear Second, so it shouldn't be less than 11 times base. And Gear Fourth is several times his limit, with several meaning 3 or more. So, Gear 4th should be about 330 times base. If it was just 3 times Gear 3rd, then Gear 4th would only be 33 times base, which is less than Gear 2nd plus Gear 3rd, which is 110 times base. Therefore, Gear 4th should be at least 330 times base, or there would be no point in using it, especially since it has harsher drawbacks than Gear 2nd with Gear 3rd. And let's not forget that Luffy uses Gear 3rd to further boost Gear 4th, so attacks like King Kong Gun should be a further 11 times amp, making them 3630 times base Luffy. Gear 5th is harder to scale, due to it having innate durability negation. I'll wrap this up with one last pet peeve. But what about water though? You've definitely heard this one if you have done crossverse scaling for One Piece characters. Any character with water powers beats all Devil Fruit users. No, that's not how it works. If it were that simple, water-based fighters like the Fishmen in One Piece would dominate, but they don't. Liquid attacks do let characters from other verses hurt Logia users, but it isn't like any amount of liquid is an instant win condition. Devil Fruit users can use their powers unrestricted, even while wet or in heavy rain. To disable a Devil Fruit user's ability, you must fully submerge the user's limb in liquid and keep it submerged. And to fully incapacitate a Devil Fruit user, you must submerge most of their body in liquid and keep it submerged. So, no, throwing water at a Devil Fruit user isn't an instant win con. That only works in the non-canon movies, which are for some reason obsessed with the idea that any villager with a bucket of water is able to defeat most of the warriors. Anyway, that's enough ranting for today. If I went over every bad One Piece power scaling take on the internet, this video would take forever. But hopefully this clears up some of the biggest misconceptions, and maybe, just maybe, we can get slightly better One Piece scaling discourse. Or not. But at least I tried.